So why don't we get started because it's 5 minutes past. So thank you everybody for joining today's September Vancouver Customer Success Meetup. And we have an exciting session planned today. We're going to learn how to navigate different stages of your customer success career. So our mission is to create a customer success connected community by sharing experiences and learnings and developing Vancouver as a global customer success hub. And today's event is organized by several individuals. So Jean, Eva, John, Maria, and me. And if you have any comments or suggestions for future events, please feel free to ping us. So today's session will be somewhat unique because we have 3 15-minute fireside chats planned. Firstly, we'll be learning how to get into customer success. Then we'll learn how to move into a leadership role. And finally, we'll learn how one could move into a different function within the organization. So we'll have chat going throughout the event. So if you have any questions, please submit your question via chat, and then we'll get to it at the end with a Q&A session. So let's start off with a quick poll. What are you looking to learn from today's event? Do you want to learn how to move into customer success, how to move into a leadership role, or how to move into a different function within the organization? So use the QR code and then we'll be able to vote. So that's a pretty good distribution of interest today. One last thing before we get started, when you do submit your questions via chat, if you can mention which fireside chat it's in reference to, that will help us at the end to direct the question to the appropriate individual. All right, with that, over to you, Eva.
Great, thank you so much, Jackie, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Really excited to kick off the first session, moving into customer success. So this is for those that are interested in pursuing a career in customer success, but I would also encourage anyone that is maybe even looking to maybe move into a different role or is out sort of career hunting at this time. Dana has some fabulous tips from her wonderful collection and experience over the years. So having said that, I am going to pass it over to Dana Soza to introduce herself and then for her to start our session on moving into customer success. Over to you, Dana.
Okay, great, thanks. Hi, everybody. I am Dana Soza. I'm on the West Coast, Southern California, loving the sunshine still. I hope it keeps. I am the CEO and founder of Dana Soza Customer Solutions and Customer Everything Solutions. And having worked from everything from a startup all the way to, you know, the big boys, the GE Digitals and Dun & Bradstreets of the world, and kind of doing everything from practically running the company in the CS department, building them from the ground up, to being an independent contributor, finally made me realize that I actually wanted to be able to start my own consulting practice. So in my consulting practice, I help people do actually every one of these. So I call it kind of, learning your ABCs. If you're breaking into customer success, that's what Eva's going to have me talk about today. And then learning your 1, 2, 3s, which is how to get promoted, and then becoming a customer success career crusher, and having me as kind of an ace up your sleeve to be able to create programs for customer success within your organization. So happy to be here.
Excellent.
Okay, you want me to just kick it off? Just go for it?
Go for it. Let's
All right. Okay. Great. Okay. So, learning your ABCs. If you're trying to break into customer success, I have a lot of experience in, number one, finding a job, because I didn't have a job for the first. I didn't have a degree for the first 10 years of my career. And so I had to fight tooth and nail for every single new job I got. So I got really creative in how it is that you actually break into any field, no matter what it is. New job, old job, I would get bored. So I'd always want to try something new. I'd have to start from the beginning. So I had to get really creative. And then I have 7+ years in customer success experience, like I said, from an IC role to, building customer success from the ground up. So I kind of merge those two things so I can make a marked difference in people's lives. So my learning your ABCs process, I built out as a framework, which I love to do. So ABCs are a framework for how you break into customer success. So it's assess, build, and capture. So when you're thinking about the assess phase, I would say that's a phase that very few people actually focus on too much. So I want to kind of concentrate my time there a bit, but I do want to kind of give you the overarching of each one of these very quickly. So in the assess phase, we're thinking about, your own self-discovery, what it is that you actually want to do. Then we move into step 2. It's a 10-step process. Then some market research, finding those top 10 companies and jobs that you really love and doing some research there. Step 3 in the assess phase is the gap analysis. Where are you now and where do you need to get to in order to get that job in customer success? Because what I think Courtney can attest to, and many others on this call, we welcome anybody into the customer success community with open arms, but actually getting a job in customer success isn't quite as easy. So, finding and filling those gaps are really important. I'll dig into that. But very quickly, the build phase is all about, knowing how to connect in a real way. I call it connecting, not networking, very purposefully. Step 5 would be building your resume in a way that has the right keywords and the things that it is that you need to say and do in that resume to actually get past first ATS, and then second past the skimmer eyeballs, and then third to actually get someone to actually read your resume. And then step 6 is what I call kind of Me Corp. So that'd be like Dana Corporation or Maria Corporation or Courtney Corporation, kind of your 10 steps to improving your online presence. And then the last part of the build phase is your cover letter, templatizing why you're perfect in a really scalable way. So those are your A's and those are your B's. And then finally, we move into the final stages, which is the capture phase. And so in the capture phase, in step 8, I talk about what I call kind of job matching instead of job searching. I hate job searching. It's kind of like job searching on steroids. Job searching kind of denotes just going out there and just kind of doing stuff, just searching, getting whatever you can. But I call it job matching because it's kind of like job searching on steroids. You are matching yourself to the right companies and the right employers. There is a caveat to that I don't have time to speak to now, but that is very quickly, if you don't have much experience in interviewing or in customer success, it's a numbers game to start. So you want to be applying to every job, just not your top 10 companies right away. Step 9 is actually interviewing, right? So making sure that you are preparing correctly, preparing for the interview, saying the right things during the interview, using the right keywords, having educated yourself in the field so that you can have a really great, engaging conversation with your interviewer instead of just some question and answer. You know, you want to be running that interview as opposed to that interview running you. And then finally, step 10 is negotiating, you know, how to negotiate your salary. And it's not just about the salary, right? The great thing about working in customer success and SaaS is there's lots of great perks. So, you know, being able to find the right way to negotiate that salary and doing it in a really respectful way with the person that you're trying to get hired by is really important. So that's my ABC process overall. So before I go back to A, because I think that's where I'd like to focus for the last whatever few minutes I have, is that good? Eva, do you want me to touch on any of that before I dig in? She's on mute, but I
am muted. There we go. Rookie mistake. This is great. We do have one question in the chat. Just wondering if you could share maybe a few examples of translating experiences that you might have outside of CS into things that would resonate with a CS leader.
Yeah, so, you know, that goes into kind of that gap analysis plan, you know, step 3 of assess. So a lot of times they'll be asking you for, you know, 2 to 3 years of customer success experience, or they'll want you to have software as a service experience. So how can you bridge that gap, right? So I have as part of, you know, I have a bunch of templates. So one of them is kind of the short-term achievement plan. You can't get the experience overnight, but you can kind of create a short-term plan for yourself to at least get something on the book, so to speak. So think about short-term achievable goals. For example, if they want a bunch of customer success experience, instead maybe think about getting certified. Another thing you can, you know, getting certified as a customer success manager. And although the certification isn't something that employers ask for, the benefit of getting certified is the education that you receive in a very logical step-by-step way. And it also allows you to be able to speak intelligently in interviews. So that'd be one. Second is getting active on customer success networking sites. Sites like, Vancouver's Meetup or Gain, Grow, Retain, the Slack Leadership Channel, the Customer Success Association Forum, all of those types of things. If you can list all of those on your resume to shorten those gaps, you know, to kind of fill those gaps, then you can put them on your resume, because what ATS does is they look at keywords. And so the more keywords that you have from the job description that are in your resume and on your LinkedIn profile, the better you are to be matched by that. So if there's a skill that your top 10 company wants you to have, but you don't have it on LinkedIn, add it once you've done some sort of something, whether that be, you know, like some of the stuff I talked about, or reading certain books and putting those as interests of yours. If you need SaaS experience, Technology as a Service Playbook is a great one. Or just Google, what is SaaS? And then pepper your resume, you know, once you kind of have a better understanding of what that is. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, I thought that was great.
Great.
John, any more context needed? Oh, maybe I'll. No, okay. All good there. Thank you.
All
Perfect.
Right. Okay, great. So did you want me to spend the last kind of, I don't know if we have the last 2 minutes to go dig into each of those, or are we good? Everything got what they need?
I think let's maybe close the loop on assess, because I thought that was just so fantastic, and even something that I definitely resonated with. So
good, great.
Go for it.
Okay, so for self-discovery, you want to think about, I've created this kind of decision matrix. So you kind of want to figure out what are the things that are most important to you in a job. Is it the work of customer success? If you've educated yourself enough in customer success and there's something about this certain type of customer success delivery that's important to you. Is it financial that's really important to you? Is it the culture? Is it the work-life balance? Is it the company itself? Is it the product that they're selling? And then being able to really understand what those things are that are most important to you and finding your top 10 jobs, creating that kind of criteria, then you can actually use that so that at the end of the interview process, hopefully, if you follow the process right, you'll have 2 or 3 jobs that you're in final interviews with, and you can use this kind of matrix of the things that are most important to you in a job as a checklist. Does company X have this? Company Y, does it have it? Company Z, does it have it? You can make a really determined, you can really determine which company is best for you. So that's kind of self-discovery. There's also a lot of really great resources out there. PricewaterhouseCoopers has this great personal brand resource where they ask you really in-depth questions about your strengths, your weaknesses, your values, your passions, your purpose, and those things will really help you understand what kind of job it is that you really want to go after. What companies really matter to you? Do you care about their mission, vision, values? If you don't, that's okay. You don't have to care about that. Care about the things that are most important to you. Taking care of your family. Salary is important. Healthcare is important. You've got to be able to figure those things out. But the best way to do that, to figure out where you fit within that type of organization, is by doing that pre-work and that self-discovery work. Then if we move into step 2 of the assess phase is the market research. You want to list what your top 10 plus company choices are. So, create an Excel doc listing kind of the jobs that you like the most. It could be top 20. And then it could even be as simple as, okay, why do I like these top 20? What is kind of the running theme of these top 10 or 20 companies that I really like? And then that can also help you determine which ones you really want as part of your top 10, whether it's the industry that they're in, the niche that they have, the salary, the maturity of the organization. Maybe you want to work for a company that's been around for 100 years because you know that you'll have, you'll be more likely to have job security anyways. And then finally in step 3 is kind of determine where your gaps are, as I was talking about before, and start upskilling through gap analysis. So the biggest one is in what I call raising your CSIQ, your customer success IQ. So I have a form that you can kind of fill out, and I think this is it right here. Yeah. So, whenever you do anything, whatever it is that you're doing to learn more about customer success, whether it be networking, reading a blog, listening to a webinar, whatever it is, create a list of, the vocabulary that you learn, the most valuable lessons that you learn from that, the action that you can take from those learnings in your job search, I think is really important. And then finally, as I was talking about before that somebody had asked, which was, short-term achievable goals for places that they say you need to have experience. So once you find out what those top 10 companies are, you'll be able to see what is most important to those companies in terms of skills and experience and job requirements. You can use something called worditout.com, and you can just throw those job descriptions into them, find out what the big major keywords are, and then use that to fill the gaps that you need, and then also to help build out your online presence and your resume. Was that helpful? I hope so.
Very helpful, Dana. Those are some very, very fabulous tips. And I mean, just this whole ABC and this logical structure and flow really helps to really create a checklist and really ensuring that you're considering every step along the way. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So for everyone, if you have any questions, as mentioned, we'll definitely have time at the end. So just make sure to reference moving in to just put move in. We'll know what you're talking about, and then you can follow up with your question for Dana. So we'll be coming back at the end, and I think we can move on to the next section.
Awesome. Thanks, Dana. It's so great. I've really loved the structure as well as whatever said. Super valuable. And so, yeah, I'm thrilled to bring in Greg Elliott, who's VP Customer Experience at Loopio, to talk a little bit about how to take that next stage in your career. You know, you're in a role. How do you move up? How do you get that promotion that you're looking for? Whether you know, a lot of the time that's into a management role, but it might just be to a senior role, a designation upwards in the domain that you're currently working in. Maybe before we dig into that, Greg, we'd love to just hear an intro from you about your role, Loopio. Maybe why don't you just start there?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. So yeah, I'm Greg. I lead the customer experience team at Loopio. Customer experience, because I know a lot of organizations would also call that customer success. It's an overarching brand name for our team, which includes customer success management, customer support, enablement services, so think implementations, adoption and on the onboarding side, and then an area RFP excellence, which is very much specific to the area that we service. At Loopio, I've been in CS, leading CS teams probably for the last 10 to 12 years. And yeah, I've had a lot of opportunity to promote people into leadership roles. So really excited to talk to you today, John, and the community.
Love it. It's great. Yeah, sounds like you got a wealth of experience. I'm looking forward to learning myself. Maybe just starting how did you know you wanted to be in leadership? How did you know you wanted to go down this manager track? Maybe just starting there. Sounds like you've had kind of a decade or so experience.
Like to me, I've been truly like blessed. There's no better way to put it. I got into leadership 2 years after I was in college. So I started and got into management really quickly. And if I look back and say, why did I do that? Like, what was there kind of some traits before even I got into the work world? For me, I go back into my experiences as a team. I was very much into creating the best experience for people that I was around. So I was involved in a lot of sports teams, and I really did care about the experience that they provided. I wanted to really to bring the best out of everybody. And so for me, that was kind of the earliest stage. And then if I look at kind of overall my career, what has kept me in leadership is I fundamentally do want people to achieve career success. This is not about my own success anymore. I've already had success. I'm pretty confident I'll continue to have success. This is now, for me, maximizing the success of everybody is on my team. And that is what fuels me. And so I think that if you have that passion for people, that really kind of helps you from a leadership perspective.
It's such a great call out. That kind of like, what energizes you? Do you get energized by helping others? It's a really big piece of management. And as a leader, you're doing a lot of thinking outwardly, less about like your personal success, but how do we help like the people I'm working with? How do we help the department, the company, our customers more broadly? So that kind of wider lens. And if that's something that is of passion to you, then it's a really great call out. It sounds like that was for you. And maybe following on from that, we've got people in the room. They just told us they're thinking about that promotion, that next step. A lot of that is possibly thinking about a leadership track. What questions should the people on the line here ask themselves to know if they're a good fit for a leadership position?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a couple questions that you could ask yourself. One of them I always say is try not to get sidetracked on chasing a title. And so if you kind of push that aside and say, manager versus senior manager versus team lead, don't focus on the title. Focus on the responsibilities you want, right? Like if I'm moving into a leadership role, what do I want to own? What do I want to impact? That is really a kind of a key indicator for you if you're going to be putting yourself in an opportunity to be successful and an opportunity that you're going to enjoy. There are CS teams that own retention and expansion. There are CS teams that are just focused on adoption, right? Like, so to truly understand what you're trying to achieve in your career and what you're, again, motivated by, I think is one key thing. The other thing to look at is just, does your philosophy around customer success, does your beliefs in how you lead a team align with the environment of the organization that you're going to be a leader in? I've been in organizations where, like, when any single customer churned, it was like there was a death in the family. And that honestly was not an environment that I thrived in, right? And so really understanding, taking the time on the organizational's philosophy around customer success, that environment, you know, is your leadership style going to connect with kind of the customer journey that's going to be created? Your belief around customer success is really important too. So you can, you know, look to get advice from people in your life, mentors, different other people, you know, in part of that process. But that's what I would encourage people from, like, question and answer perspective.
I love it. Yeah, the focus on responsibilities, experiences rather than title is super important. I think it goes back to what energizes you and where you're going to be spending your time. The title won't make you feel better beyond like a sudden rush of a new title. If the work isn't fulfilling, there won't be any longevity there. So it's really, really important call out. And there's also a difference I find, and I've said this to anyone who wants to be they say, I want to be a leader. I said, well, leader is not a title. Who do you know who has leader as their title? Like, anyone can lead and anyone can influence from any seat. So manager is different to leader. Like, a manager has different things that they do. There's a lot of administration to that. And so think about the actual role that you want, because you can lead from anywhere too. So
yeah, I would agree with that. Like, when you're taking on a team, when you're going to management, what teams are looking for is for you as a leader to share your vision. That's one of the first things. Like, when I join any organization, everybody's like, what's your vision for our team? What's your vision for customer success? They want to align themselves in that belief. And then when you talk about that, then they quickly try to have conversations around their career, right? And they want to talk about where they want to go in their career. And so being able to coach people, support people from that. And obviously people crave a ton of feedback, right? And really desire feedback. And I've always said, if you don't like being in a leadership role or even a management role, there's a part-time kind of like psychologist aspect to it. And you encounter a world of problems from your customers, problems from the company, problems that people are going through personally and different things in their life. And if you don't like being a part of that, if you don't like hearing that and really empathizing with that and trying to help them, support them through that, then management's going to be a tough go for you. Great
call. Yeah, if you think you have problems, you know, with one set of customers, if you're a CSM, think about if you had 6 CSMs and all they do is come to you when things are bad. It can get heavy. So be thinking about that as well as yes, future consideration. Would love to learn. You know, sounds like you promoted people into these roles, whether it's into senior designations, into leadership. What do you look for? Like, what are the things you consider when you're considering those people for promotion? And, you know, are there any examples of things that people have done to set themselves apart from others as they're making their case to go forward?
It's cool. I know there's some folks from the Loopio team on with us today, so I'm always excited to talk about some specific folks and the successes that they've had. So a lot of times people might think one of the first things you have to do in a CSM role to be successful, to be considered as a leader, is to hit your targets. And for me, that's not the reality. I like, to me, hitting your targets, yes, that's great to show that you're successful, but there's a lot of variables that go into hitting your targets. So that's not what I look for first. One of the things I'm looking for first is, besides, like I talk about, like this empathetic, caring type of person. So you always see a lot of people who are supporting other employees, supporting new employees. You look for that kind of part in their DNA. What I love to see is people who are a positive influence on the team. In customer success, it is easy to get down on things. You have customers that are struggling. Your product is never evolving. Your product is never moving forward. Your product is never fast enough. You're never hiring enough people for your organization. It is very easy to be a negative person. What is difficult sometimes is to be positive in those experiences. So somebody who can motivate the team in a role where they're not even a leader, but push the team to see a different perspective, to me is first and foremost what I am looking for. And then that is connected to team meetings, right? Somebody who is a secondary voice to who is already a leader there, right? It's not the easiest thing to do sometimes, but to be there, and not in a fake way. You don't want anybody to just say stuff because they think that's what the manager wants to hear, but really truly believes in that and is willing to separate themselves from their colleagues or peers to say, hey, I actually support that. I agree with it. This is a benefit I see with that. So that's like a level of maturity and confidence that I'm looking for people. In a CS role, you've got to be able to push the evolution of the customer journey, right?
Yeah.
I'll never forget a conversation I had with one of my CEOs, and he said, listen, if people in the CS org are not doing their job differently a year from now than the way they are today, we have failed them and they have failed, right? There's so many things changing in our world with how we do SaaS, the tools we use, how your product's evolving. You've got to be pushing the customer journey and thinking about how can we make it better and voicing that to the team and to your leaders. And then a couple of other things is I love to see people who own data. My team is probably going to smile and laugh right now because they're sick of me hearing that. But I love it when people own the data. They know their data. They know what's going on with their portfolio. They know how much revenue that they own. They know what kind of where there's opportunities for growth. They have stories to share around that. I just love to see that command. And then the other thing I look for when I'm hiring my leaders is I'm not the best at everything. There are certain things that I'm weaker at. And I love to bring people in who kind of complement that and fill the voids in areas that I am weaker at. And so an example would be, I'm not a big fan of documentation and process and even like longer term training. And so when I bring in leaders, people who have that skill, I love that because I really respect that in people.
Awesome. It's great. I really, what really resonates with me in particular is this idea of someone on the team having perspective, like having a perspective beyond just like their own role, being able to speak up and actually see something that's maybe suboptimal or something we need to evolve and make a call and say, hey, yeah, I believe this, or this is the direction we should go. And when you get into management, you have to start making decisions. And so someone who's already been able to show that they're able to see what's around them, determine what's important and say, hey, this is the direction I think we should head and here's why, is a really key skill to be able to demonstrate. And almost everyone I put in the management position myself has to some degree demonstrated that.
That's nice.
So yeah, I love that call out. Very last question before we move into the moving out is what can people do to prepare themselves for the move, for the conversations with their leadership?
Yeah, like I think in preparing, I've already talked about knowing the data. Like if you're wanting to be considered, this is going to go pre-COVID times. So like when I used to go back, when I used to be in the office and I was striving to kind of continue to progress in the ranks of CS, I always, in case I ran into any executive in the hallway or in the kind of the lunch area, the hangout area, I always was prepared with a story that I wanted to share. Like I always had something that I wanted, either a piece of data that I thought they would be insightful, a story about a customer that I think would be cool. It was really trying to re-emphasize kind of the value that I could potentially bring as I continue to progress as a leader. So always kind of, again, having that strength, being prepared for that, like in SLT, proactive communications, because they're not talking to customers, insights you can bring around that, I think is always something that is good. You know, to double down on something that Dana mentioned around networking, I don't believe you can ever do enough networking. It's something earlier in my career I did not really take advantage of, but for me, I have done a huge amount of networking that has really helped me with my long-term success. And for sure, for somebody moving into a leadership role, to build yourself a network of people who you can bounce ideas off or have as a sounding board, I think is going to be really important as you prepare for that leadership role. And the great thing too is by building your own network, you're building a talent pool for people that you can recruit from. And so one number I'll share and kind of re-emphasizes the importance of networking. And so like right now, I think 37 people or something like that are on the line. So that means right now you should be connecting with 36 people on LinkedIn. And it's because 70% of our hires that we have done over the last year and a half have come from our networks of people that already work at Loopio. So you should be connecting with people at the organizations that you're interested, that you're motivated to join, because that is the pool that we tap into excessively to really accelerate the hiring process, because it's a super competitive market out there. And so just encourage the group to think about that.
So powerful. Yeah, the power of a network is critical. I love the focus on having this kind of library of stories, examples that you can share. That kind of visible work is really important. And managing up in that way can be really impactful too. Greg, awesome insights. I learned a ton. I'm sure people did too. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. We'll get to them in the end. Otherwise, let's move on to Jean and Maria as we think about what other roles may exist that you want to think about in terms of sideways, diagonal moves into other areas within the customer organization and beyond. So Jean, Maria, I'll hand over to you guys.
Thanks, everyone. Those are some big shoes to fill or to follow up on. You guys had a lot of great tips, and so really appreciate it. I mean, I think I'm going to be using some of those, but I've also kind of tried to live by some of those as well. I think that we can maybe touch on how some of those tips that you guys just talked about are also effective and how to move out of CS if you're tired of CS or looking for something different. So just let's maybe do just a quick introduction. And maybe can start with you, Maria, around where are you now, and like how did you move out of CS, or how are you moving out of CS?
For sure. So hi everyone, my name is Maria Isaak. I was the customer success program manager at Absolute Software. I'm currently in between, taking some time off before my next new gig, but been in customer success for, majority of my career. I want to say almost 7 years, whether it be like a CSM, product specialist, wow. And then of course, customer success operations. So I've had a lot of fun in the CSM org. But yeah, for me, it wasn't always about moving up. For me, it was more like, let's see what else can we do? What else if I didn't want to lead people, what could we be doing? So for me, I chose customer success operations.
And for myself as well, like I started my career in CS, leading teams, starting to build CSM teams, and just found myself really liking the structure and trying to figure out like how do we operate better, and less so figuring out how to help that customer better, or the specific customer. And so I've been in customer success for about 15 years, but the last 5 have been purely CS ops, sorry. And so I think that's like operations roles. When you're in marketing and you look at marketing ops, or sales and you look at sales ops, or CS and CS ops, I think that's a natural trajectory if you're looking to move out of CS. And I think some of the reasons why people probably move out of CS are potentially because of, they're looking for something a little bit different. Like I find, with CS, as a CSM, for example, you're often more trying to coach and enable someone else, but you're not actually able to drive the change. Is that something that you've found, Maria, as well, like that's quite different in CS ops?
Yes, very different. So in my time as a customer success manager, loved customers, loved talking to them and learning about their pain points, but it was just from a point of view of like, this is my recommendation and this is the tool that you should be using, obviously the company I work for. So, and then from there you make the recommendation, and you either do or learn, or don't know or learn after in your next check-in or meeting if that was actually something that was implemented. So that was great. Sometimes they took the advice, and then when they didn't, it's like makes me a little bit sad. Whereas with customer success operations, it was really like I got to sink my teeth into, a process improvement. For example, like maybe wanting to help CSM save time from sending a bunch of product release emails or anything like that. Like, how can we make things better? And then being able to take the idea and then implement it, and then, okay, say, yes, this worked, let's keep going, or hey, this didn't work, let's try something different. So I think it was a little bit more of the control aspect that made me more interested in the ops side.
I always like to say that I always felt like I was the race car driver that would get out of the car in the pit stop and start tweaking the engine and then get back in the car and drive it. And I found out that like I actually enjoyed tweaking the engine way more than driving the car and trying to figure out how fast someone else could drive it. And I could just keep innovating and seeing how much better can we tweak this engine. And I think that's part of the skill set of a CS ops person, right? Like you're constantly focused on how do you make this engine better? What are the better processes? What's the better tooling? How do you tweak certain things to drive more adoption, more expansions, more retention and renewals? And so I think those are some of the key skills that you can take from what you're doing as a CSM or someone in CS, whether you're manager or leader or whatnot, and to maybe perhaps move it over to an ops world. But I don't think that that's the only role you can move out into. There's definitely lots of roles that are out there. I've heard of people move into product or development, sales, or upstream into sales or marketing, or further post-sales where they're doing services and other roles as well. But I think there's lots of opportunities. But in your case, Maria, you've done this recently. How would you transition from like how would you convince your leadership that you want to be more ops like, or you want to do more things about tweaking the engine, and how would you approach that subject with maybe someone like Greg?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it starts by this is where I will actually disagree with what Greg says, where I do think it is important to be successful in your existing role first, and then once you've kind of mastered that role, or gotten good enough at it that it saves you enough time to do other things, is to take on some additional projects. I'll share an example of one of like simple wins. Like the team that I was on at Absolute, we were early days customer success team, and when I got onboarded for my first time, I noticed that there was just some improvements that could be made from a customer success manager's experience learning customer success at Absolute. So I basically just told my boss at the time, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna revamp this if that's cool with you. And he had a million other things to do, so he's like, yeah, sure, have at her. So I did it. We implemented it. So that was one win. And then I did another win, which I mentioned around trying to save some CSM's time with sending out product releases. We used to do it manually, and we use Gainsight. So we started using like at the time it was Email Assist and then Journey Orchestrator, different tools within Gainsight. And then that was another win. And then over time, it just became like you have like this arsenal of all these little things that you have improved within the team. And then so it kind of became kind of natural when I was talking to my boss around it. Also, I was a little bit bullish in saying that that's what I wanted to do. But it was like, okay, yeah, I want to be in CS Ops. It's like, great, Maria, like, that's it. But if you start proving it out and like, well, I did this, I did that, then it became a little bit easier for them to understand, like, okay, yeah, this is valuable. And then of course you see it in the market where larger organizations are now starting to have customer success operations teams or persons. So it just happens. And yeah, that's kind of how I made it happen at Absolute.
I think you touched on a couple like key skill sets there that I think like within CS Ops, I think there's so much that can be trained. I think that you can learn on the go, and there's a lot of great resources out there. Like most of the tech companies or the CS tech companies have books out there, and there's a lot more content now coming out like on blogs and whatnot. So there's lots that you can learn. But the one kind of key thing that I think you touch on is focus on how to make something better. And just looking at like whether it's onboarding playbook or whether it's an email campaign or something, but just that mindset, like how can we make this better? I want to make this better. And then I think the other part of it is just being innovative, figuring out like taking a problem, getting analytical about it, and figuring out what are all the components, and then trying to figure out like how would we fix this, or finding some solutions to that. And I think as you want to move into maybe another role, I think you touched on some great tips of how to transition that with your CS. Because if you go to a CS leader and you tell them, I want to make this better, there's not a CS leader in the world that's going to say, no, we don't, this is good enough.
Exactly.
Like SaaS is not about good enough. SaaS is always about constantly innovating and getting better and improving.
Mhm.
And so, you know, I can imagine that any CS leader would be incredibly excited to be able to see someone with that passion that can throw themselves at a problem and try to fix it. So
Yeah, it's always about like when I think about like any type of process, whether you're developing a new one or or just looking at an existing one, it's always a big question of why. Like the question of why is so powerful. It's like, why are we doing it this way? Is this the best way? And then you go down that spiral in your head, and then eventually you're thinking, you come out afterwards like maybe something better. So yeah.
that's awesome. There's just to finish off, I think we have a couple minutes before maybe opening up the floor to Q&A. I wanted to share just a couple things around, like I work with a lot of CSMs. I coach a lot of people to get into CS ops. And if you are looking to get into a different role, similar to what Dana was saying about, you know, how to become a CSM, like start learning, go online, start Googling, if nothing else. But there's also a bunch of training courses. And if you look at, you know, all the CSM type training courses, they do cover a lot about like, what does a good process look like? Or how do you do onboarding? How do you do, you know, welcomes, or how do you manage adoption? And those are kind of great sort of ways to figure out like, what are some of the normal processes that a CS team may have? Because operations is really about figuring out like, what are the processes that a team or the CS team or services team, whichever team is doing. How do we measure the results of those processes? And what are the tools that we equip those people with? So the technologies or the different software that they can use to help do their job better. And most of the technology out there covers those two aspects. It covers like the two main aspects, the analytics, like how do we measure where a customer is at in their health and what they're up to, and then what workflows or what processes can we trigger off of that data. And so there's lots of great tools out there that can help do that. Most of the software out there also has a lot of training. Gainsight has training, Tango has training, the Churn Zeros, Catalyst, all of them have different training to learn their software. And so overnight, like, or over a weekend, you can kind of throw yourself at them to figure out like how these people do process management or data in a CS world. And then I mentioned there's a ton of books. I've got a bunch of them behind me here as well, from all the different companies, some practitioners in the space that are thought leaders. And so that's, I think those are, you know, great opportunities to kind of learn, either, you know, improve your craft as a CSM, but also, you know, start thinking about like, well, what else could I possibly do, you know, for other roles, and not just CS ops, maybe it's product, maybe it's sales, or whatever kind of really is something that you're passionate about.
Yeah, no, I agree. I definitely think learning from others is really important. Just like picking other people's brains around like, okay, what kind of playbooks does your company have? Like, just tell me. That's what I did with one of my other, not colleagues, friends, just asking about what they do at his company. But yeah, I definitely agree with everything that you've just said. Podcasts are great.
And Dana and both of them like mentioned networking, serial networking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like networking with peers that you look up to or that you want to be in, or that their roles are in where you want to go, I think is incredibly passionate. Because one thing that, yeah, I think Dana touched on it, like the world in CS, everyone's super empathetic and willing to pick up the phone. That's just by nature. You wouldn't be in CS if you're not willing to pick up a phone and talk to people. And so I think I always tell people like, you'd be amazed at how willing some CS leaders just willing to chat with you, or have a virtual coffee nowadays. And so I think that's really important. Don't be shy. Just reach out to people and see what, you know, what they'd be willing to share with you and chat about. So.
Yeah, I agree. Virtual coffee chats. I've had my fair share in the last few little while. So it can be a little bit nerve-wracking, especially for those that haven't done it for the first time. As someone that has recently had to do them before, as recent as, you know, like the last year, it's okay. It's a little bit, it can be fun sometimes. And then you make some friends. All right. I think that's it.
Perfect. Yeah.
Or are there any other questions?
So we do have a fair number of questions in the chat. Thank you for submitting your questions, everyone. And I will be going through them in chronological order. So please feel free to submit any additional questions that you may have as we go through the Q&A session. So the first question is for Dana, and it's asking, do you have any resources you can share that you spoke to in the session, specifically the PwC resource you mentioned?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of their personal brand workbook. If you just do a Google search for PricewaterhouseCoopers personal brand workbook, maybe put like .pdf in there, and it should pop up. I'm a big fan of that. And then I would be remiss to not give my own plug of all the resources that I have. So I'm building out a customer everything club that will have, all the resources that I've used over the years, all the resources I've created, all of the different webinars I've been a part of, templates I've created both for newbies coming in, for customer success managers on the job, for directors and VPs, building out CS programs, all that good stuff. So that's coming soon.
Perfect.
Got to do the plug. It's important. Can't help it. Shameless plug.
And right away, we have folks helping one another in the chat. So thanks for sharing the link to the PwC workbook also.
Oh, great.
Next question is for the move out session, Maria and Jean. What technical skills are important to learn to transition to CS Ops?
I'm going to say Gainsight. It helped when I was back at, so not at Absolute, but back at Hootsuite where when I was an ops lead there, I was self-taught learning Gainsight. There was a couple people over on over at Hootsuite that did know about Gainsight, but a lot of it was watching videos, and I chatted with their support team constantly about things. So I think that's definitely a tool. It's a CS tool. So I definitely encourage anyone that's interested in ops to at least know some of the fundamentals of Gainsight's functionality. John,
And then I would say as well, like just in addition to that, I think it really depends on like what your company's using. Not every company is on Gainsight. So if you are like, if your company is using Trend0 to Tango, whichever one, pick up the web, go find out like how you can maybe learn. Don't be too scared, I think, of the technologies. Like when you think of the tooling, it is your bread and butter. If you're a CSM and you do CSM things, you actually are going to understand the back end of the systems quite quickly, because it is like, in the back end, with all these tools, and I think I've been certified or trained in 5 or 6 of them. They all have the ability to build out playbooks. They all do things like email campaigns, and they all have the ability to do like data loads to bring in the data so that you can have a customer 360. When you look at the back end of that, based on your own CSM experience and with your own company software and your kind of just CSM practice, you are going to be able to kind of figure some of those pieces out. Like you should know like what a playbook is, almost like, what are the things that, like, why would you use an onboarding playbook? Those things can be super helpful when you jump in. Sure, you'll learn like what button to hit to create a playbook or edit a playbook or things like that. But just understanding why would a CSM need a playbook or use a playbook for a certain aspect of their day-to-day is incredibly powerful. And then what I always recommend as well is like any data modeling courses could be super helpful. With all of these systems, you are kind of taking a customer record and connecting all these different data sources to it. So like survey data, usage data, subscription data, sales data, whatever it is. And it all kind of gets connected into this customer 360 data model. They all have this kind of model, and it's a pretty standard model. Like Salesforce has the exact same model and same with all the other CRMs. And so, if you do some studying there. I find the technologies like Gainsight, Tango, all those guys have some good insights in there, but you can also find some good coursework anywhere else, like on YouTube or Udemy or whichever other platform. And then if there's any other plug that I can make, not my own plug, but Trailhead and the Salesforce community is super good for just forget, like there's lots of great Salesforce content, but just outside of that, they have a lot of good content around becoming a data, like doing data modeling or project management and so on. There's so much great content there to learn from as well.
Great insights there, Jean. Appreciate it. And I have another question for both you, Jean and Maria. Any tips on how to convince your company about the value of CS Ops?
Any tips that I can share? Yeah. So one, again, like it goes back to what I was saying, just doing the things that others may or may not want to or have the time to do. So it's such as, like starting slow, like create those playbooks, take a look at a process that that's already made and see if evaluate if there's a way to make it faster or better. That's kind of like the low hanging fruit that you could start with. But then just having that conversation with your manager around like, okay, this is what I've been doing on top of like my existing role, what have you. I think that there is a need for this, and this is the reasons why, because again, you have your arsenal of all the things that you've done. It's kind of how I did it. John, I'm not sure if there's any other secret tips that you have, but that's how I did it.
The only other thing I would add is like, I think there's ways to drive better adoption. And so pitching that you can help with driving happier, better adopted customers is always good, but also if you can tie it back to revenue somehow, like whether it's retention or driving some expansions. So typically, like that's where I deal with everything that we do in CS Ops at PTC is all about how do we drive retention and expansions. And so when it's dollars associated to it, if you can prove that, then it can be super helpful to drive some alignment and buy-in.
Great insights. And I see John also just added a comment about how CS leadership would be very interested in understanding how the CS Ops connects to the broader company and CS initiatives, including better retention, efficiency, etc. So someone asked about what tools you use in your day-to-day work with CS Ops, specifically SQL. Do you have any insights for that? In addition to Gainsight, do you use any project management type tools?
Other project management type tools. We started at Absolute using Asana. So that was something that we were using. And then back at Hootsuite, what I was using was, oh my gosh, I think I was using Rike back then a little bit.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of great tools that do project management, like for managing your own work, or also like having CSMs manage the work or the implementations. In terms of CSQL, I've definitely, for me personally, gotten into that, but I don't think that's like the normal skill set of a CS Ops practitioner. Like usually, if you're getting into CSQL queries and data warehouses, probably that's like more IT focused, but I've never seen it as like a requirement under CS Ops. But if you do have that background, it would definitely be another tool and tool belt that could be potentially advantageous if you already have it.
Great. So those are all the questions for today. We do, however, encourage you to take Greg's advice and connect with everyone on LinkedIn, and so you can send your follow-up questions to the subject matter experts if you have any. So that's it. Thank you so much, folks, for joining today's session.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a great afternoon.
Thanks,
Catch up
everybody.
next time.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me.
Thanks, everyone.